graciously come all the way here from DC to present an ethics training to us. A little bit about Martha. Her bio, she's been with ICMA for approximately 13 years, where she provides guidance and training to ICMA members, such as this august group. And she administers the ethics enforcement process and provides support to ICMA Committee on Professional Conduct. She also consults local governments, which is what we're doing this evening, and on developments of ethics and ethic policy and training programs. Prior to joining ICMA, Martha served her time working in municipal government, where 17 years as a manager, assistant manager, finance director, and budget analyst. I do see that she never held the hardest job, which was human resources director. I won't hold that against you.
Thank you.
She holds a undergraduate degree from Penn State and her master's in public administration from University of North Carolina, or UNC, as most of us like to call it. So please welcome Martha Parego.
Okay, well, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day, at the end of your day, to spend a couple hours this evening talking about what I think is really one of the most important topics that we have when we talk about any industry, but especially about public service, because that's what you're really about, public service, serving the community. And how we serve the community and making sure we pay attention to that is really vital, because it's actually all about building trust and confidence with the public that we serve. Now, some people think that, we really shouldn't have to have dedicated time to talk about ethics, but all you have to do is Google ethics in government, and you'll see a long laundry list of people who really needed to be more reflecting on what it means to be in public service. And some people think it's really easy because you just need to have good people. Hopefully you had the benefit in your life of, being raised in a good environment where you learn right from wrong early on, and maybe you had a great mentor in your career. Maybe you had a small error somewhere in your life and it was an opportunity for you to get it right further on in your career. But the reality is when you work in public service, and you all know this, it's very, very different. There are lots of challenges out there. Wise people don't always make good decisions, unfortunately. So all of us, really, if you want to be successful in our careers and successful in working in our communities, we really need to be thinking about this first. And this, I think, ethics is really about the right kind of set of values, things done the right way to achieve the right outcome. And the real difficulty is how many people are there in your community? 25,000? 31, okay. So there are not 31,000 eyes on what we do day in and day out, but there are a lot of people paying attention, and they may disagree about whether or not you did things the right way. So we really do need to pay attention to this topic. And I also think it's not just, adherence to a set of rules or procedures. ICMA, which is an association for professional city and county managers, and we've been in business since 1914, and in 1924, I wasn't there then, but the people who were there said, this is so complicated, we need to write a code of ethics so that we can help define what is our obligation to our profession, what's our obligation to the community we serve, what's our interaction supposed to be like with the elected officials. And so that's really why we pay attention to this issue of ethics. And I just lost my train of thought for one little second there. It does happen. Anyway, it's really important for us to pay attention to ethics and what we do and the way we do things in our organization. Some of you, and I do need to do introductions in a second here, but some of you professionally also are part of an association or a profession that has a code of ethics or a code of standards for you, and that's helpful too. Over the next couple of days, we're going to be doing some training with your staff members as well. And one of the outcomes of that might be the organization defining what are our values into a code of conduct and a code of ethics. And one of the things we start talking about values is, what's the value that's really important to you? And this is an interactive session. What's the value that's really important to you? And I'm going to have to do the mic thing. Can I take it out?
Sure.
What's the value that's really important to you?
Honesty.
Okay, what's it mean to be honest? Tell the truth? The whole truth. And nothing but the truth. So we talk about examples, and I like to use examples. So up in north of you, Tacoma, Washington, got a little issue going on right now, and the police chief has just been reprimanded by the city manager. Tell the truth. And I don't think I don't know this person, I don't think he's a bad person, I think he's like 99% of the people who work in local government. He's a professional, he knows what he's doing, he's trying to do the right thing, trying to serve day in and day out. His situation is tell the truth. The whole entire truth, everything that you know relevant to a situation. So in Tacoma, a very sad story, a child was abducted. The call went out when they realized the child had been abducted, and they asked for someone to issue an Amber Alert. And there were only 1 or 2 people on staff who could do that in the police department. So they called the police officer who's charged with that responsibility, and the Amber Alert was issued later than the time of the call, and the police department made a statement about that during the midst of looking for this child, that the Amber Alert didn't go out right away because there were some reasons why we were still searching for the child. It's a very sad story because the child was killed almost immediately by this abductor. The parents sued the city. Several years after this situation, in the depositions they took of the police department, they realized that the reason why the officer didn't issue the Amber Alert was he fell back to sleep. He was so exhausted having worked double shift that he fell asleep before he could do the Amber Alert. That was not disclosed to the city manager and the staff and the elected officials at the time of the incident. The reason why, so now the city's in a position of trying to recover their trust with the public. Well, we know you made a mistake, but why didn't you just tell us when you made the mistake? Then the compound matters, what the police chief didn't do was tell the manager that not only did the person fall asleep, he was paid to be on duty that evening. So when you talk about tell the truth, it's total candor. And when we're in a situation like that, and again, I'm not, criticizing these professional people for, just malfeasance. I just think that you talk about your relationship with the public and what does it mean to tell the truth. Total candor, getting all the facts out there so that people trust that you're not holding something back. So there's a story about what does it mean to tell the truth. So we have these values, be honest, tell the truth, but you have to define them, and then you have to reinforce them with your staff. Because I think most people in that situation all thought they were telling the truth, but they weren't as candid as they should have been in getting all the facts out on the table.
You're in a situation where the city can be sued, and in fact, you've got a situation where the attorney advises you to say nothing because you don't know what the resolution is going to be, and you actually want to protect in some way the city. It seems like you could have a conflict in that particular situation.
Yes, and that's a great example of oftentimes these ethical issues are not between doing right and doing wrong, but they're between competing right sets of values. So in that situation, you have a duty to the public to tell them what's going on in a situation, but as elected and appointed officials, you also have a duty to protect the organization. So you could be in a situation where your attorney says you cannot release that information because it's privileged or it deals with personnel matters. In this particular case, that information was not even disclosed amongst the staff and was not disclosed to the elected officials. And they had a right to know what was going on. So we want to define these values. And so when we talk with the staff over the next couple of days, it'll be about creating awareness of what these values are in local government that they should be paying attention to. What do they look like day in and day out in your conduct? And then maybe that might lead the organization to think that we really do need to take some time and effort to kind of define values and expectations. Because we all look at these situations in really different ways. And at the end of the day, oftentimes we think, well, I was right. But you're going to be held accountable by each other and by the public that you serve. And you don't want to do anything that, again, would undermine the trust and confidence that hopefully they have in you. So I do want to just take 1 second and ask you all to introduce yourselves so I know who's in the room. And when you do that, who are you? What is your position, either a commissioner, the mayor, or on staff? And how long have you been in that position with the city?
I'm John Lewis. I'm the Public Works Operations Manager, and I've been here for almost 8 years now in that position.
Nancy Walters, and I'm on the Urban Renewal Commission, and I think it's been Kathy Ross. Kathy Ross, City Commission, 4 months.
Ah, I didn't say that. I didn't laugh like that. And you're new to elected office? Okay.
Paul Aker, I'm an Urban Renewal Commissioner, 4 months.
Okay.
I'm David Wimmer, I'm a CPA and Finance Director, I've been here 17 years.
I'm Mike Conrad. I'm the police chief, and as a Duke fan, it's probably unethical for me to talk to you.
Okay. I don't know. How do you guys do this year? I think we can do it before.
I'm Scott Archer. I'm the Community Services Director for the city, and I've been here for a little over 6 years.
Maureen Cole, Library Director, and I've been here almost 2 years.
Doug, the mayor for 4 years and then 12 years on the commission before that, and a graduate at NC State.
That doesn't get an extra point.
Rocky Smith, Oregon State Commission, 2 years, and I'm a teacher for 10 years.
Betty Mum, Oregon City Commission, new as of January, and been at Providence for 24 years.
Tony Conco, Community Development Director. I've been at the city for a little over 9 years.
I'm David Frazier, City Manager, and I've been with the city for 1 year and 27 days.
Greg Peterson, Urban Renewal Commission, just probably short of 2 years.
Ryan Shaw, Urban Renewal Commissioner. Well, it seems like 10 years. Probably only 2.
Okay.
I'm Nancy Crosser. I'm the Public Works Director and City Engineer. I've been in that position for 11 years and been with the city for 15 years.
I'm Jim Leffler, Human Resources Director. I've been with the city just coming up on 3 years.
You do have the hardest job.
You're right.
So,
We have a couple more.
oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ignore you all.
I'm Kelly Burgoyne, Assistant to the City Recorder for about 2 years, and with the city for about 4.
I'm going to echo her. I am Terry Bankhead. I'm the Assistant to the City Manager. I've been in this role for 2 years and at the city.
Reach that far.
Karen Moore, I'm the official public. Oregon City Chief for Conference this last October and 32 years as an adult parole liquidation officer.
And you're the official public?
Yes.
Okay. You're the only one who shows up at council meetings? Okay, so one of the, and it really is a great idea to mix the group instead of just talking about David and his leadership team or just the elected officials, because you all are a team and you need to work together closely, and some of these values and how you look at things sometimes are a colliding point. So it's often really helpful to start this conversation as a group because you look at things from a different perspective. And my chuckle about being new to elected office is just to reflect a little bit on the challenges that elected officials have, because one day you're a community activist or someone who's interested in the community, you've lived here a long time maybe, or you've just moved in and you've been here a couple of years and you decide to get involved in the community, and you can do all that work and you can walk into City Hall and you can talk to any person you want to talk to, totally unfettered, and they'll talk to you as a citizen, as a resident. You can get involved in all these different activities. You have your personal life, You have friends, socialize. The day after you get elected, it's an entirely new game. When you walk out into the Park and Recreation Department and you see some of the crew in the field and you say to them, wow, wouldn't it be really great if we did X? They didn't just hear a community activist or a resident making a suggestion. They heard a commissioner telling them, we better go do that. You go out and socialize with people, you participate in different events. They're your friends, they've been your friends for a long time, but now all of a sudden do you have a potential conflict of interest because, you know, you're in a city commission and you're making a decision. So I think it's extraordinarily hard, especially in smaller communities, for people to really go into public service as an elected official. And I think it's really important for you to pay attention to what you do and how you do it, because again, it's so complex that you may inadvertently get yourself in a situation where the public's calling into question your independence, your objectivity, because now you're making these decisions on behalf of the community, but yet you have all these ties to the community. So, sound familiar? Yeah. So let's circle back to why we have to pay attention to ethics, because this stuff is not really easy. So let's talk a little bit. There is a handout that's not just the PowerPoint. It's something that hopefully is a takeaway that you can think about and look at a little bit later. But just in terms of, what is that? Sorry, that's I don't think I want to end this yet. So just a little bit of humor. I love these guys, pearls before swine. And the rat says, my ethical conduct has begun to sink below even my standards. I think it's time for me to change. And the pig says, I'm surprised to hear you say that, rat. What are you going to do? And the pig says, I'm going to lower my ethical standards. The rat says, people might change their conduct. And the pig's like, why take the hard road? Well, we know because the headlines are filled with people who've taken the easy way out on something. So just to kind of like reflect why focusing on ethics. So, you know, this whole concept of this democracy gets thrown around a lot, but really what you're doing is running democracy. You deliver democracy to people's doorsteps every day in terms of getting elected and acting on behalf of them and delivering services. Oh, we're going to have a little issue tonight. Went too far. And so you think about it, you know, the speed of our democracy versus the speed of our society. Which one's faster? Society, you know, we can get things done in society a lot faster than we can in local government. But what is the reason why government sometimes is slow and ponderous and it takes a long time to make a decision? Input from others, because we're acting on people's behalf and because you need to be able to make sure that you have had that input and that you protect the rights of other individuals who are out there. And so sometimes people get really dismayed about government, and they're very cynical about it anyway at this point in time. And they think, well, you know, the problem with government is you just should act faster as a business. But we're not. We're here to support some core democratic values, and we need to pay attention to that. So there are golfers and surfers in the room. So, surfers in the room now? Surfers. Surfing? Surfing, very good. Surfing in the ocean. Okay, and then the golfers? Okay. So anyway, this is Warren Bennis, who's your neighbor in California, who is a well-known management guru, professor. And this is just a great analogy, I think, that helps you kind of figure out where we are in terms of our culture. And he says it's sort of chaotic out there. And the old way was we were golfing. And when you're golfing, I'm not a golfer, but I've heard, you first of all have a long period of time in which you can be out on the course. You have advice from a lot of different people hanging around you. You can see where you're going, which is really important in life. You can see the goal. Conditions change. You can change out your equipment. So you really can see your goal. You can think, you can get advice, whatever. But that's not where we are anymore. Where we are is in surfing. And when you're surfing, half the time you can't see where you're supposed to land. You don't take anybody with you for advice. You can't change out your equipment. And that's really kind of the culture that we're in right now. We're not in this era of golfing where we have all this information and we can get advice. We're really in this era of surfing. Things are changing very rapidly, quickly, And he said this before we had the economic meltdown. So, no sharks on the golf course, but sharks in the water. So, unforeseen situations that can take you out in a heartbeat. So, yet again, another reason to be thinking about what we're doing here. And then you have really, I mean, a lot of times we talk about ethics, we talk about don't do something stupid and don't do the wrong thing. But really, when you think about all the issues you're dealing with right now, a lot of them really are right versus right sets of values. You have people who want to have business growth and development right now when the economy is so bad, and you're going to have people in your community say, no, we need to preserve our environment, we need to keep to our environmental standards and values, and we don't want this community to be overcome with business. So neither one of those groups of people are wrong. They're competing sets of values, right versus right set of values. I don't know where you are within your budget, but a lot of local governments right now within the organizations are making decisions about, do we retain our employees and ask them to take significant cuts in order to balance the budget, or do we, keep our employees, keep a course of employees and let them keep their benefits but go through significant cuts? Those are just different competing sets of values. So again, really why we need to be paying attention to those values. Think about trust. It's really a currency, and it's very valuable, and you're not going to get a lot more of it. You got X amount in the pot right now, and if you burn that trust currency with people, it's very difficult to get it back. Don't even get me started about laws and rules and regulations. When we talk internationally with people, we tell them, you want to pay attention to what we do in the United States because we have a long, rich history of corruption, and we haven't solved the problem yet. But one of the things we have done is found creative ways to write new rules and regulations and laws. We don't want people just to adhere to the laws. What we want people to do is think about their conduct in terms of the highest standard possible, not just what the law requires of me. So think about this. Tell me something that you could do. I'm going to pick on David. Tell me something that you could do in your job that would be legal, but that would be viewed as unethical.
Probably date an employee.
Yeah.
Work in my office close to my.
Legal. Okay. Anybody think that passes the smell test for the city manager to be in a personal relationship with a subordinate employee? Yep. Okay. That's a good one. That's really a stupid thing to do anyway. It's also a good example about the difference between ethics, which is really a set of standards for the organization, versus morality. So, morally you think, well, we don't care, that's somebody's personal business, that's fine, it's not illegal, what he does in his own time is fine, assuming that, all this is going on outside of work. Ethically, he's responsible for the entire organization, and having a personal relationship taints his relationship with every other employee, not to mention the fact that it opens the organization up to litigation and to liability and to harm. And so from an ethical perspective, not appropriate at all. So something else that you could do that's legal that would be viewed as unethical.
I could try to get perhaps one of the department heads to put something on their priority list that's my priority. And it doesn't necessarily fall in the scheme of things of what's generally should be the priority.
You're the mayor.
But I'm saying it's not illegal.
I know. It's not illegal, but he's leveraging his position and his authority within the organization to get something done. Pet projects. Yes, without going through the process. He's committed to working with his colleagues as equals, and so he's violating that commitment when he tries to use his position to get things done. So when you think about it, there are a whole host of things you could do that are not legal. You could take a few pieces of equipment home for the weekend, bring them back on Monday. Personal use of public, probably not illegal. Okay. Is it? Okay, right, good. So Don't do that.
Conversely, are there things, for example, are there things that would be illegal, like, for example, speeding, that aren't necessarily unethical? So that you're running somebody in the hospital, maybe. Right. There are times when you're doing something, it could be technically a violation of the law, that's not necessarily unethical in every situation.
So, but be very careful, because one of the things that happens is you work in this structure, and so one of the ethical obligations you have is to respect the roles and responsibilities of the voters, the elected officials, and the staff, depending on where you are. So the city council or the state legislature has ordained a law. You are required to follow the law. You may not like the law. And if you're in a situation where it's your city council or commission has enacted something and you as staff members had an opportunity to voice your professional input beforehand and you routinely in solidarity said this is a really bad idea. Well, guess what? You had that opportunity to state your professional opinion. If the commission approved that, then that's their right to do that. And your obligation is not to decide, well, we're not going to follow that rule or that law because we didn't like it to begin with. Your obligation is to work for the success of the commission and implement that rule and regulation. And if you can't, for some reason, then you really ought to have a heart-to-heart with yourself about whether or not you can remain within the organization. But your option is not to just say, well, we're just going to stonewall that. So there are times when breaking the law may not be unethical, but I think there's a very narrowly defined set of circumstances. And too many times people rationalize around that it's really okay. The one set of laws that I think we can agree that were unethical across the board for all the Jim Crow laws in the South that did not provide basic human rights to all individuals. I mean, you know, those obviously were unethical, and there might be a few out there, but generally speaking, people's issue is not that, you know, I think this is an awful law, unethical law. It's mostly professionally they disagree with it, or they have other reasons why they think it's okay to violate the law. So, you know, and then at the end of the day, I really think this is about your legacy of leadership, whether you're on the staff or as an elected official. Paying attention to the reputation of the organization, the community, and being able to move things forward is really rests with you. First of all, if you all are not paying attention to this topic, guess what? Nobody else will be either. And when we talk to the staff, we talk about frontline employees are the face of this organization. And when they do things the right way, the public is watching. Everybody's watching. And when they do things the right way, the public says, wow, this is a really good employee. Or maybe, you know, they're not even paying attention to whether it's a good employee. But conversely, if they do something that's not appropriate, you can be absolutely sure that someone is going to notice that. And then that person's going to say, well, they all must be like that. And that just adds to this cynicism. And for you all, you set the tone. When you decide that you're going to work to the highest standard and pay attention to your conduct, you never know who's watching you. And I know that watching you sounds like Big Brother-ish, but really, people take their cues from you. And so staff members watch what you do, the public watches what you do, and that's why it's so important that you're sort of on your game all the time and paying attention to this topic. So if you walk in the room thinking we should be paying attention to ethics, I hope at least have convinced you otherwise at this point. So who is your favorite, you know, you work out there in the field and different things. Who's your favorite leadership? What's your favorite leadership philosophy? Who is your favorite leadership person? What books do you read? Who do you pay attention to? Where do you get your cues on what's right and wrong? Tell mine's pearls before swine.
When I think about city government, we had a senator a state senator, who listened to people who interacted well with other parties. He almost never voted the way I thought he should. But he had tremendous personality in terms of in terms of engagement, in terms of listening. So was James Vern Duncan, and I would take him as probably one of the people that I've had tremendous respect for, even though he was a different party. And as I said, a lot of things he did supporting, I didn't particularly support. You knew he was listening to you.
Okay, so his listening has respect, core values, even if he disagrees with you. Others?
My guiding light was always Tom McCall. He was the governor of the state of Oregon. And I had an opportunity to spend 4 hours with him once when I was a young college student. And he literally turned my life around. Changed a lot of what I thought and the directions I was heading. It was just his moral compass.
His moral compass. Others?
I'd simplify this a little bit. Sesame Street. That was I'm not sure that's what I learned it, but it sure represents what I think. When I see bad examples of this, it's clear to me that those people didn't watch Sesame Street. They don't know how to treat one another. They lie, cheat, so that's where maybe y'all learned something about me, but I took some things from Sesame Street.
Ever read that book, Everything I Ever Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten? I mean, some of this are really basic things.
There's children that you can watch that you just know. You might not know the difference between
Most drivers in D.C. never went to kindergarten because they don't know about taking turns and sharing and things like that. But, you know, when you think about leadership philosophies and principles, whether it's somebody who, regardless of whether you're on another page, is going to listen and respect you, someone who's going to inspire you, someone who has a strong moral compass, the do's and don'ts about how you treat people is all part of, you know, these leadership philosophies. But all these leadership philosophies, the ones that really work at the end of them, all have some commitment to values. So this, again, is Warren Bennis, who talks about, well, I think he describes his, you know, these are the fundamentals of leadership. You've got to be adaptive. You got to be able to engage people. You have to have a distinctive voice so that you can get people to follow you. But he has also talking about unshakable integrity. And if you've never read this book, Leading for a Lifetime, it's really worth it, and it's a quick read. And this is what he calls it. It's an integrity tripod when you think about it. It's a combination of your ambition, and we all have ambition in life, your competence, but you're anchored on your moral compass. And what happens if one of these is absent on a tripod? One of those legs falls over. So who do you know who's got great ambition and great competence, but no moral compass? You know, Pete Rose, you know, great ambition, great competence. Talk about a good baseball player, but absolutely no moral compass. Nothing that's grounding them to understand that this is so important to have these values. So these other guys, I don't know why I've got all these Southern California business people, but you know, they did a survey of 30,000 employees across all industries and said, what's the most important thing about a leader? What do you want to see in a leader? What's the number one answer that they came up with? I want to work for somebody who's honest and who I can trust. That beats out knowledge, skills, and abilities. They were asking people who are in the business industry, who work on Wall Street, who get bonuses, whose, you know, income is really dependent on the success of the organization. And overwhelmingly, they said, we don't care about knowledge and skills and abilities. I want to work with somebody I can trust, someone who's honest and has integrity. So if you had to ask yourself these questions as a leader, is my behavior predictable or erratic? Do I communicate clearly or carelessly with people? Do I treat promises seriously or lightly? Am I forthright or dishonest? You know, And all that goes back to what's your moral compass, what are your values, are you clear about your values? So, now this is the last one of these, but, you know, Jim Collins wrote the book Good to Great and went out and interviewed all these people trying to figure out what makes a company really not just good, but what takes them to great. And they talk about level 5 leadership. It's the leadership within the organization that makes it great. But one of the core things about good leaders is they've got the strong moral compass. They know the difference between right and wrong. And when they're faced with issues day in and day out, they're guided by those core values. And so, you know, this is his advice to people. You know, really, do you know what your core values are? Have you ever sat down and do you ever write them out? Do you ever think about them, reflect upon them? Because at the end of the day, you know, are you willing to sell your core values for success in life or success in what you do, or are your core values really what are going to guide you, hopefully in the long term, be successful? So, you know, it's your Declaration of Independence. You give them up before you did something wrong, even if it meant the ultimate sacrifice for most people is, my gosh, if I do this, what if I get fired? Well, you got fired, but at least at the end of the day, you still had your integrity intact. So Warren Buffett, and he is being challenged right now. I use him a lot. I have utmost respect for somebody who has managed to make all that money over that period of time and devote so much of it to a foundation and yet live this very simple life. He doesn't have Mercedes-Benz and big houses and all that. But that said, even he today is being challenged because of some issues with his reported successor in his corporation who did some things unethical and that Warren probably should have known about. So think about this. It's about the intangibles. It's about your own personal reputation, your professional reputation, and are you willing to have that be marred by something you might do wrong?
Trust, because it can be built in a different way. Somebody who's in a superior position over another gives a person a set of instructions and trust is going to do them. It doesn't correspond with a set of values, and that trust is in the wrong direction. I mean, the trust without the integrity piece, I think, is not necessarily good.
It's a package of values. So, you know, in this instance, Warren Buffett trusted his second in command. His second in command did something that is totally unethical in the organization. He you know, bought stock in a company that his company was thinking about buying. Talk about duty to candor. When Warren asked him, well, how do you know about this firm? He didn't disclose how he knew about it. He just said, I have stock in the company. Well, that turned out to be a lie. So he trusted him. He thought he was a person of integrity. The corporation has a code of ethics, and at the end of the day, that trust was violated. So anyway, thinking about the intangibles. I'm a visual person, so to think about it, that's your integrity on an index. We don't want illegal conduct in our organization. So many things that you can do that are legal. But, you know, you can do those legal things and someone says it just stinks, it doesn't pass the smell test. Sometimes you see people do things and you think, well, that was just okay. They could have done something better. And that what we're really trying to achieve, and it might be impossible in all things in life, is just this really stellar conduct that's beyond and above and beyond reproach. So think about values in public service. And I think, yes, it does spell ethics, but, you know, equity, trust, transparency, honor, integrity, commitment, and stewardship, those are great words, right? But what do they mean? They might mean different things to different people. So here's just sort of one way that we've thought about these values and what they mean when you work in local government. So equity means you've got a commitment to serve all your constituents, not just people who show up at the council meetings on a regular basis, which is a good thing. But what we know in local government is people are so busy in your community that typically you don't see people in your community at all your meetings and voicing their concerns. So we want activism, but you also need to pay attention to people you're not hearing from. The underserved within your community, not just those who vote, but everybody. So serving all constituents equitably in programs and treatment. You know, bring diverse input, trying to get that so that when you make these decisions on behalf of people, you've got appropriate policies, encouraging active participation in the community. You know, the driving force, again, is not expediency, you know, and sometimes it's why government is so slow and takes such a long time to get things done, but fairness in all your personnel matters. You know, that you're making decisions based on merit. You know, it's often a small community because, you know, you might have encountered people before and you might prejudge them, or you might have some information and that calls into question whether or not you really trust some of the people who might be on your staff. But really have to think about decisions based on merit and not, you know, your personal bias or your influence. How would you define trust? We talked about this a little bit, is respecting the roles of the voters, the contributions of your staff, and the responsibility of elected officials. And I think this is sometimes where we get side democracy. That's what that is. And sometimes that's what causes us some ethical issues because we decide that wherever we're sitting, we know more than the rest of the group knows. You know, public discussion and debate on policy matters. You know, you ever watch another community on TV and the vote's 7-0 and the council meeting takes 10 minutes and there doesn't seem to be much dialogue and debate? You know, that doesn't instill confidence in the public that you're really being open and having a lot of conversation. It might send a message that, you know, it's a done deal, backroom politics, all that sort of stuff. Really important, especially for elected officials, is to pay attention to hearing all the voices and the facts before you make up your mind. And that's so difficult because perhaps you got elected on a platform or you promise things to people, and that's fine, but once you become an elected official, you're part of a group, and now what might be really good for one neighborhood might not be the best thing for the community at large. That's why you have such a tough job. But it's really important that, you know, you be independent and objective and you don't promise your votes before all the facts are in and all the ideas are vetted. One of the issues I think that derails us is sometimes we adhere just to the law, but we do things that violate the spirit of the law. So think of something that you could do that violates the spirit of the law. I'll pick on the elected officials. The law requires that you not start counting the votes until you're in public, and yet you're having casual conversations, and somebody who really wants something to happen is starting to poll people, and so you poll the mayor, and then you poll this person, and then you poll this person, and at the end of the day, you kind of figure out before the vote happens, where do people stand? Actually, in some places, that's now a violation of the law, too, but it didn't used to be necessarily every place. So it's a violation of the spirit of the law. The law wants you to make decisions in public and allow the public to be fully informed about it. And when you do that, it undermines the public confidence in it. We had a really interesting case where one thing I thought you would say, David, about something that would be legal but would be unethical is for the city manager could certainly engage in politics, not illegal, to make campaign contributions to the mayor's re-election campaign. It's not professional, it's not ethical, it's supposed to work for all the elected officials equally, so should not engage in politics. But we had a city manager up in Minnesota who's really smart on budgets and local government finance, and a candidate for governor asked him if he would like to run as the lieutenant governor on her ticket. So he decided this would be a really cool thing to do. And so he went around and asked all his elected officials, don't you think this would be a really cool thing for me to do? And they're like, yeah, this would be great. We need somebody up at the state capitol who understands local government finance. He said, well, okay, so do you mind giving me a partial leave of absence so that I can campaign while I'm the city manager, because after all, if I lose, I don't want to quit my job to go run, you know. And they all said, yeah, that's a really great idea. And on a Friday, he announced his candidacy. And on Monday night, the council voted to approve a change in his employment agreement to give him a leave of absence so he could work part-time and then campaign part-time. And there had been no public discussion about that whatsoever. All behind the scenes. So we do things like that. People are like, that's really not right. Adhering to, information. So information out there really needs to be accurate. We talk about everybody makes mistakes, every organization missteps. If you get yourself into a crisis or something else, get all the information out there ASAP as quickly as possible. Don't hold back. But in terms of your operational data, confidentiality with regard to executive sessions, both for staff and elected officials. If you're in a duly held executive session, what's said in there should be confidential, and it's really a violation of the trust that you have with each other if someone goes out and starts chatting about executive sessions. So what does it mean to be a person of honor, to have honor? Well, like, do the right thing. That's what Spike Lee said, just do the right thing. Sometimes you're not sure what the right thing is, but set the bar as high as possible. Be respectful and civil in all your interactions with people. Don't bring disgrace to the organization by your conduct. Really being honorable. Conflicts of interest, so I call it the 3D test. Discern, do I have a conflict of interest? And when do you have a conflict of interest? Basically, anytime your personal life reaches a crossroad with your official position, whether you're an elected official and if you're a staff member with your job. So anytime those two things intersect, you should stop and think, I have a potential conflict of interest, and then you need to deal with it. And well, how do you deal with it? Well, sometimes all you have to do is disclose it. It might be so minor that it really isn't a conflict that needs to be addressed. It may not be illegal, may not be really an appearance issue. And you want to disclose it right away to avoid an appearance issue. So if that comes out later on that you had this conflict, then someone starts to call into question your judgment. In David's example, it's conflict of interest for the manager to have a personal relationship with an employee. There's any amount of disclosure in the world that's going to cure that conflict, you have to disengage. So the 3D test on conflicts of interest. Do you give examples of conflicts that you've encountered?
So we've had one here kind of recently with a former urban renewal commissioner, great guy. He had owned several properties on downtown in the urban renewal district, and had applied for grants for urban renewal money. I mean, he did the typical thing, stepped out of the room when discussions came up. Kind of a gray area, for all of us, I think, but so that became kind of an issue. That's all I kind of talk about that anyway. So it became a big issue for some people and others, but that was kind of an uncomfortable one.
So public service has a price that you pay. So do you think that the commission should only be staffed by people who will not be in a position to get grants and awards? Oh.
It's a little difficult, where you've got kind of expertise in work, is oftentimes those very people that are successful in doing that. And I mean, it was a major concern to some people and less to others, as he pointed out. But in fact, he had somebody else make the presentation. I already step out of the room. Somebody else made the presentation. But it is an issue where you all know that person, and is that person going to be treated with some sort of deference, which I don't think happened. But as to another person that you didn't know that well. But one we commonly run into is where we are granting monies out of funds that that are administered by the city council or a board of the city council, and a grant comes up and we're actually associated with a nonprofit that's requesting those. And in this case, we know we disclose that, but we don't necessarily disengage. But that's an area I think most of us have encountered at one point or another.
That is one of the challenges of working in the smaller community, especially because the pool of people that you're drawing from to be on these commissions and boards and things is much smaller. The problem doesn't go away in a big city, but it's just compounded in a smaller community, and I think 31,000 people is a pretty small community. And so you're looking at this level of expertise. But what is the public thinking when this individual is sitting on this board that's going to approve this grant, and even though if he walks outside the room and doesn't participate, 9 times out of the 10, they think, well, his colleagues are going to support him because it's so difficult for peers to, challenge each other or to step up. Now, so you raised another interesting point, and it's actually one of the case studies I gave you that we're going to talk about a little bit after the break. But let's just jump right into it. Okay, it's page 11. A city council member also serves on the board of a nonprofit entity that provides job training services to the unemployed. The board members are not paid for their service, and the nonprofit exists solely on grants and private contributions. It's question number 3. The city is about to award a grant to the entity to establish a training program for city residents. Can the grant be awarded in Oregon City legally? Yes. Okay. Should elected officials sit on the board of nonprofits or other agencies that receive city funds? Should they? What are potential ethical issues with that? Perception. That you're in a position on the board, now you're in a position to make a decision. Even if you recuse yourself, does the average person think that you're really arm's length and independent of the decision that's made? Perception. And perception is reality sometimes, it really is. So what do you think? Should city commissioners get off of boards that receive city funds? Yes. Okay, I think yes, but
whenever you degrade in any way the confidence the citizens have within the process of government, that's part of a slippery slope, and it's hard to stop it. And it's based upon this degrading of confidence. We must protect all cases of degrading of confidence.
I don't know why recusing yourself would make it a problem.
So if you just recuse yourself, you should be okay. What's the staff input in these decisions on granting or funding?
We only have 2 funding sources, I think, in which we give grants out of, and they're all from nonprofits. I think at least 2 of us sit on the board of those kinds of things.
It's like these ethics issues are little onions, just keep peeling them back. So you have to stop and think, are any staff input you get, is the staff really going to have that courage to be clear about what they recommend and don't recommend? And if somebody doesn't meet the standards and the mayor happens to be on that board, is the staff going to have the courage to say, yeah, you know what, your agency shouldn't get it? Oh, okay.
We're given the package and we're giving for evaluation.
Okay. All right. So you've kept the staff off the hook in that one. I'm not trying to cast aspersions on your ethics. You're just raising an issue because this is fairly common. Hence, good. And, so in this case, you don't have staff engagement, but that's always an issue if staff is making a recommendation and they're dealing with, in essence, people who are their bosses. Can they really be independent? Will they be independent making recommendations? And then the perception in the community from other organizations.
Oftentimes, when they said the staff doesn't make recommendations, and that is true of staff, sometimes individual staff members will give letters of support for the project, though. But it's not being done from the standpoint, I hope, that this elevates the project. It's just an indication how a given department sees that this particular grant coming forward would be general benefit to the city as well. But it's not really a recommendation of the staff to do something. It's just that it has been supported by a staff member for some reason or another.
So in some organizations, the elected officials have decided once they've gotten elected to stand down from, boards of nonprofits and community things that they've worked on, just so they can create, when there are funding issues, this total arm's length, and so that the public would, and other agencies who apply for funds would have confidence that, there's no kind of favoritism. One of the most challenging issues I ever heard, or challenging decisions I ever heard about an elected official who voluntarily stepped down from a decision, was a business owner in a community, and the community was talking about changing the zoning ordinance, and it would apply across the community, but it would benefit his business. And he elected not to vote. He didn't legally. Legally he could have. He elected not to. The matter died on a 3-3 vote, so it stalled. Some couple years later, the issue came back up. New commission in town in place. Matter votes, comes before decision, and it gets approved. In the meantime, we've had this economic crisis. His business has not benefited from this potential change, and he's paid a significant financial and personal cost, but had made the decision, if this thing was going to move forward, he just didn't want people to be saying, you benefited from it and you voted for it. So he declined to vote.
That's a little bit different.
Yeah, it is a difference.
Because the two funding sources I was talking about, there should not be staff payment coming out of those monies. The board members, the people that are on the granting agency should have no remuneration at all should the grant be awarded. So I don't think that would be an issue.
So this you're talking about money that's going to a nonprofit or, public service or public benefit, versus a decision where somebody stepped down because they had a personal benefit, even though lots of other people benefited as well from the decision. So I still stand by my recommendation. And talking about what's integrity is telling the truth always. This duty of candor, which, it's a phrase that they use in the business world, financial disclosures, came up when I was reading about Warren Buffett, thinking about this police chief in Tacoma. If only he had told the manager every single thing he knew immediately, candor. So it's not just, well, here are 90% of the facts, but here are all of them, and ASAP. Communicating clearly, I use this with the managers and the senior staff. How many times you've been totally frustrated that your staff have not been able to fix this one simple little problem, and someone walks into your office or gets called into your office and you say to them, I don't care what it takes, would you fix this problem? Well, you really do care what it takes. So are you communicating clearly with each other, with your staff? Are you clear about the directions you're giving to them? And then, all these situations where you could walk into something where it creates that you're leveraging your office for personal gain. And you've got a pretty good gift law in Oregon, thankfully. So hopefully you don't stumble into too many gift issues. At least that regulation about what you get when you go on a conference, sort of stuff. I've come across that before. But gifts are really an issue, and I don't know why people get involved with them to begin with. But if you are being offered something, stop and think, is it significant enough that someone's going to call into question whether or not it was a reward or a potential opportunity to gain fame or favor? This is what I think about gifts. We spend so much time talking about this. Can I take a cup of coffee? Can I take a free lunch? It's nothing but a mousetrap designed to ensnare you. It's just not worth it. And so what would you think about integrity? I think really some of it is the courage to revisit the decisions that we've made. And, we make bad decisions sometimes. And so really stopping and thinking about what it is we did and adjusting course. Really, one of the most difficult things, and I included an article in the packet that I actually get to write a little column for our professional magazine on ethics every month. And I don't really have to spend a lot of time thinking about examples because they're examples of what people should and shouldn't do all the time. But in this one, the article is really about the challenges that managers and senior staff have with elected officials and the difficulty of, managers, the importance of peers managing each other. And that's really the commissioners, being able to call each other when they see something that's not appropriate and being able to talk with each other as opposed to relying always on the manager to point out some issues. So, and at the manager's level, the responsibility of dealing with the peers and the department directors also being able to challenge each other when they see things that aren't going well in the organization. So I included that because I just thought it'd be interesting for you to read. So challenging wrongdoing. And then commitment really is the sense of, a commitment to walking the talk, building a positive culture where ethical conduct is going to thrive, which means that you challenge each other, you set the values of the organization, you hold people accountable. Really coming to this, public service is a wonderful opportunity to serve, but really it takes time. Whether this is your avocation or vocation, you got to be prepared. You have to spend time and thought and come in with energy. And, if you're in the business a long time, you got to keep fixing those skills and redoing your professional development, but really bringing to it everything that you have to contribute and energy to your work. And then you think about stewardship as being a custodian of the public trust, because that's really what you are. This one I think is really critical because you're going to disagree about the future of the community and decisions you make. And, hopefully people who work for David, he gives you an opportunity to voice your input and he takes it seriously. Hopefully the city commission takes David, the staff's, input. Hopefully the commission members take each other's input. At the end of the day, when the vote's done, everybody should really be working towards the success of that commitment and not kind of laying back and saying, well, next time I'll get it my way, but you guys are on your own. Really working for the success of the board and for their success. Leaving the place in better shape than you found it. And that's, some places that can be, not just a little bit better, but really better than you found it. It's your legacy of leadership to the organization. So in short, if you had to think about those, seek no favor, your opportunity to build trust through transparency and honesty, treating all equitably and with respect, and building great communities through good stewardship. That's one kind of model of taking the values that people would say, well, I understand what these values are, and making them real and giving yourselves as an organization some guidelines upon which you can interact with each other in a way that really produces some good conduct. We talked about some of these common ethical situations a little bit. We do things that violate the spirit of the law, so think about what is the intent of the laws that we have and don't do anything that violates the spirit of it. We get a conflict of interest in fact or appearance, and I think that's probably one of the #1 challenges for elected officials and for staff members who live within the community, because you're always sort of at the intersection between your work and your responsibilities and your personal life. It's just there all the time, and that you just need to think about that. This was another person who spends a lot of time thinking about ethics, Rushworth Kidder, who talks about, demonstrating moral courage. And hopefully there aren't that many times in your long career where you have to do it, but they are there. The really tough decisions that you have to make. So sometimes doing the right thing really requires you to demonstrate some courage. We talk about right versus right. You know, neither side is not incorrect in their value set. It's just they've got competing values. And so how sometimes do you, when you're in the middle of a disagreement with somebody, do you step back and realize it's not that the person's wrong, it's just they have a different set of values, and how do we then work together to kind of put those values out there and reach a decision or a conclusion. And then I got a great example for the staff members about doing the right thing the wrong way. And we'll talk about that one a little bit after the break too, because I think you probably could find it interesting. So facing an ethics issue, we got sort of some questions for you to ask yourself that might help you achieve the right kind of outcome. Number one, is it legal? I don't know what defense you have if you do something that is illegal. You have probably no defense. Does it violate the spirit of the law? So if you hear these words, is your city attorney here tonight? If you hear these words, technically it's legal. That should be a warning sign. Don't do it. And I'm not picking on attorneys, but you know, they're there to keep you out of trouble. They're there to give you an opinion about whether or not.
A lot of cases in history where doing the illegal thing was in fact the right moral thing. But it's a case of whether you're willing to take the responsibility society will put on you for doing something illegal. But we've got a whole history in this country where actually people did the illegal thing because they felt it was wrong, and society ultimately judged that they were right.
Right, and I agree with that. But I think in this day and age, be thoughtful about it when you decide. I think that this rule or this law is illegal, and therefore I, as a public official, am not going to follow the law. So I think the case was one of the recent examples. I think it was California when they were going through their debate on same-sex marriage, which I'm not even sure if they've resolved this yet. And some city clerks decided that they weren't going to follow the law because they had a moral objection to it. Well, you're a public official, you've sworn to uphold the law and do what's right. And if you can't do that, then you ought to be thinking, well, maybe this isn't for me. There have been people who stayed in organizations deciding that the law, I want to be a force to change the law, and I think I can do that from within. So I think the reason why I caution this one is because I think rather than the great moral dilemmas of the day that people decide to violate the law, they just violate like little simple laws because it's for their convenience sake or professionally they think it's okay. So I agree with you. The Jim Crow laws and probably other things that are out there now that, you know, segments of society would think are morally wrong, and I should not be a party to it. It's just when you're a public official and your obligation is to represent the interests of the public, you need a different strategy than just deciding I'm going to stay within the organization, but I'm going to violate the law. And the spirit of the law is to comply with our rules and regulations. So you're like any other organization. I bet you've got stacks of rules and regulations. What's your defense, especially if you're at a senior level, if you just decide to violate the rule? So pay attention to your rules and regulations. If you don't like your rules, change them. But don't just decide to arbitrarily apply them. Is it consistent with our organizational values to the extent that you have defined them? And you may not have defined a code of ethics for this organization, but I bet you could probably identify some interpersonal and inter-team kind of agreements that you've already reached and achieved, and you might do something that's going to violate those. And so an example of that is you've got a relatively new city manager, 1 year and 27 days, and I hope, you know, in the first couple months that he was here, he said to his staff members, I want your honest input, I will always take it, and I promise you I will never go around you and do something that you're supposed to do or make a decision that you're supposed to make. In other words, I won't pull the rug out from under you or countermand you unless we have a conversation first. So hopefully he said that. So it'd be breaking his commitment to you if he just decided, we're not doing that in public works, I don't care what you want to do, and ordering your staff to go to different things. It undermines your ability to manage your team. So that's an example of we've made we have organizational values, and we've made commitments to each other, stated commitments. Am I the only or primary beneficiary? So if you're the only one getting the tickets, if you're the only one getting the special deal on cell phones and a special deal on iPads or whatever, you got an issue. If somebody wants to offer something to the whole entire organization, that's one thing. But if they're just offering the deal to you, or the ticket to you, or whatever, you should stop and think about whether this is ethical for me to accept it. Will I feel okay and guilt-free if I do this? You can only use this question if you have a conscience. If you are ethically tone deaf, this one is not going to help you. Pete Rose felt fine. He still feels fine. Yeah, but he's fine. How many times have we done something because bias or emotion is clouding our judgment? So I really don't like that staff member, and I'm always going to give him or her the crappy jobs. You know, things like that. Unethical. Would I do it to my family or friends or myself? How many, the golden rule. And, it can be a little bit corny, but, if you're about to do something, if you had to run it up against the most ethical person in the world, would you still do it? Would you do it if you had to tell your mom, your kids, your mentors? Think about what would the most ethical person do. So what we're going to do right now is take a break. How's that, for 15 minutes? And when we come back, we've got some more real-world scenarios for you to resolve. Great, so welcome back, and we're going to focus on two different things. One is a few more practical examples, and as I mentioned before, I don't really have to spend any time making these situations up, because I hear from all of our 9,000 members, U.S. and internationally, tell me tales about the things that they've gone through. Obviously, I am from Washington, D.C., so that in and of itself just gives me unbelievable number of stories about the things that people do that just are unbelievable. So I'll just share one of them with you, because this one is just amazing. And I think it's, we do laugh about this stuff, because at the end of the day, it's really stupid. But these are not stupid people, and these are not necessarily people who are just trying to game the system. They're just, something is not working right, and they're thinking as a public official. So Washington, D.C. Council had an election. They have a new mayor. And the old mayor was one term, which is unusual in D.C. And he was a young guy, very popular, but he got ousted because of the accusations that he was giving all these no-bid contracts for construction and development for city projects to his frat brothers. And the truth is, he went to college with these guys, and so cronyism or whatever. So the new mayor comes in running on a platform of, we're going to do things the right way. And so his seat's up. He was a council chair. So someone else who's been on council, runs for the position of council chair. So you got the mayor who runs the city, and the council chair who runs the council. So this council chair needs a car. So he picks up the phone and calls the head of the motor pool, or his staff does, and says, the new council chair needs a car. He needs a fully loaded Lincoln Navigator with all the electronics, whatever, and it must be the color scheme and everything. So it comes in, and he rejects it because the color scheme wasn't right. He wanted black on black, and this was black on tan. So this family, because he must have it. I know, you're shaking your head. You were shaking her head. I must have it for my inauguration. I must have it. So they are scrambling across the country trying to find a black on black. So they finally get it. They pay extra to have it driven in from Indiana or someplace, and he has it. Well, okay, so this is the other reason why you don't do anything like that in an organization, because somebody leaked this to the Washington Post. Because I don't think the Washington Post was running around trying to figure out what this guy was driving. some staff member or somebody else who heard about this was highly annoyed and offended. And, you know, so this is the person who's been on council for a number of years, who professes to want to do things for the community, and just like doesn't think, and then gets called on, and he goes like, I don't want this equipment anymore. Well, you can't take it back, you can't return it, it's all leased or whatever. So, just examples. So, it's in January, so we're barely into the new inauguration, the new group. Then for the mayor who run on the platform for doing things the right way, turns out they interviewed somebody for a job and gave him a job. This person had been the third party person in the mayor's race. The last candidate, you know, wasn't doing too well. And so the allegation was that, you know, we kind of paid off the other candidate who wasn't going to win for mayor by giving him a job for which he was not qualified. And then when they started pulling staff in front of the council and under sworn testimony, do not ever lie under sworn testimony. Never do it. That I promise to tell the truth means something. Don't ever put yourself, this staff member says, I'm not going to lie for you. I didn't ask for this person. He's not qualified. Then it turns out he has, they didn't do a background check, and so he's got a criminal history. And so now the mayor who ran on the platform of doing things the right way is being accused of just hiring his cronies or whatever. So, anyway.
Feeling that he was doing the right thing for a member of the council, for the mayor, who thought it'd be good to see the mayor riding on an electric bicycle. And he talked on the bicycle company, said, give him one, to show that we do it here, you know, sustainability like that. Fortunately, the city manager spoke to him after the fact, and he returned the bicycle. But you can actually do things the way you think for the right reason. It's something that can be perceived to your specific benefit. So.
Yeah, am I the only or primary beneficiary? So, you know, somebody, and it's kind of the rationalization, and first of all, we all rationalize small ways in our lives. I think it's how you get through life sometimes. You know, but when you're in that position, okay, I need to support sustainability. Well, how could I do that without receiving some benefit that everybody else is not entitled to? So I can support sustainability by buying a electrical bike. You know, I could do this. You know, as opposed to, but we rationalize and we don't see these sorts of things. And so I don't know what this council chair was thinking about. Well, why do I need a Lincoln Navigator? You know, just to do my job. And so. Oftentimes, we're blind. We're talking about why unnecessary conduct happens, but you get blind spots about it. You rationalize it. You get arrogant about things. The senator from Nevada who resigned, you know, in his finally resigned in his statement said, you know, I just was totally arrogant. I've been in a public office for such a long time, and I just didn't stop and think about what I was doing. So he had, you know, an affair with his. He had an affair with his chief of staff's wife. And then when it was disclosed, he had his family give a large sum of money to this chief of staff. And then what got him, I mean, all those things get him, but what really got him was there's a regulation that says if you leave the federal government, you can't go lobbying. And he gave the guy a couple tips as a way to help him with his new lobbying venture. And that's what really got him at the end of the day. But it's sad because here's someone who was trying to do the right thing in so many ways, but for some reason, you know, couldn't see the forest for the trees, and arrogance and other things just really took him down in a number of ways. And he had finally admitted it, and this sort of heartfelt, that it was just arrogance, and that people should surround themselves in politics with people who will actually tell you what you need to hear, not people who are just trying to help you get reelected.
Interesting to know if DC had a policy on car lease that wasn't range. You know, was this one of those things where it was legal, but you know, we pushed it to such a limit? But then the other question is, what about the employee who probably got the paper, you know, all these undisclosed quotes or leaks? Those are, they raise other issues.
Oh, I have to go back to the mayor's point about sometimes it's ethical to do something you might otherwise think is unethical. Couple things. One is structurally they have an issue, and this is why I am a proponent of the council manager form of government, because there was no wall between the department director who was told to do it and the council. You know, and interestingly enough, that individual who made the decision used to work for our executive director in the city of Hampton, Virginia, and if some elected official come in and ask for something that wasn't appropriate, you at least have the staff who would say, no, I don't think you want to do that because we don't, it's against the policy, it's against this, it's against that, or whatever. And so, but in a strong mayor form of government they have, there's really very limited opportunity for someone to say, no, you can't do that. And certainly the department directors didn't feel like they were empowered. And who are they going to go to when it's the chair of the council who's saying, we need this stuff? So it's just a bad situation. Let's just get away from DC for a while and talk a little bit about, we're going to talk a little bit about some other practical situations that come up and kind of challenge your brains a little bit. And we'll talk about what you can do from an organizational perspective and the results of the assessment that we gave to, I think, everyone had an opportunity to fill out, and how that's going to help the organization maybe decide what are some next steps. Because we're out of flu season, but I say this ethics training is not like, an inoculation. You do it once and you're done. It's really the beginning of a conversation within the organization about how are we doing, what can we do better in different ways. One question came up at the break, this whole gift thing, and I said that I thought you all had a pretty good law because it's $50. You can't take anything over $50. But part of the issue is sometimes people are just trying to be nice and they just want to thank you for something. So, kind of differentiating between what is something that's very small and nominal that someone is just saying thank you and that's acceptable socially versus something that's really going to get us into trouble. So you could do something nice for a homeowner and they come in and they decide they want to give you a plate of brownies or something like that. Within the organization you decide how you're going to deal with that, but that's just someone saying thank you. They're not trying to bribe you. It's a plate of cookies. But, I'm the health inspector, and a new restaurant opened in town, and I was really helpful with this restaurant. I helped these people get through the process, and after all, that's what we're here for, to help people get their businesses open. So you're really helpful, you get the business open, and the person comes back and says, thank you so much. You were so patient with me. Here's the gift certificate for lunch.
Cookies, there's no evidence after eating.
Okay. What's the evidence trail? So you start to see how it's different. One is just, no one's going to look at that plate of cookies and think that's an issue. Somebody who's in a regulatory function should never be taking anything from anyone so that they can always say, look, I'm arm's length on this, I'm independent, objective. No one is going to sell their soul for, a free lunch, but it's that appearance issue and it undermines the public's confidence in what we do.
And in Kansas City, they have this, in my hometown, they have this place called Posse's Popcorn, where I think 90% of this stuff comes from. And it's there, it's really fresh, it tastes fantastic, it's really good. And other places we get it, well, we never know what to do with this stuff. I mean, he's just trying to get us cheese tickets and royal tickets and all the good things. So I would end up so we didn't offend anybody, I would set it out there in the lobby, and anybody who wanted it, you had little cups and people could eat it. And the employees ate it, citizens ate it. Probably the health department, I don't know.
Well, so,
it's generally available to everyone because we didn't really want to.
And so, during the holidays, many people say, look, if you can eat and drink it in a day and everybody on the staff can share it, we're not going to be offensive and say no. I worked in a community where there was a lot of development going on. It was the 80s. Those were good years, too. And, you know, a developer brought in cases of champagne for some staff members and for the elected officials. So there's a big difference between a tin of popcorn that, you know, lots of people can eat and a case of champagne from a developer. You know, so, you know, using your judgment. Someone said, well, what if someone just does something for you and you don't know about it? So that doesn't happen to staff members that often, probably just other officials. But so you're at a restaurant and somebody just decides to sees you in the corner having dinner or whatever, and just says to the maitre d' or whatever, I'm going to pay for their tab. And as you know, as you're going to leave, you realize that so and so's paid for your tab. Well, if it's your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your child, that's fine. If it is a business owner in the community, or you know somebody who's going to have official action in front of the council at some point in time, or commission at some point in time, you should find out how much they paid for the bill, write them a check, write them a thank you note, send it back and say thank you very much, but this is really not necessary, you know. So.
Something like that. I think that when you give it to some charitable organization or something, and you actually don't benefit, then what about that?
Again, that one depends. So.
Like a lawyer.
I'm not a lawyer. The reason.
If someone did that, pay for my dinner, I pay them back. If they wanted to donate, that's their thing.
I think it's a bad habit to get into because the person intended it for you. People see that it's come to you. People may not know that you gave it to somebody else. So the alternative strategy is just to say, well, we had one community do this because they were spending so much time with their staff members trying to figure out what they could take and what they couldn't take. You know what the definition of, a good question to ask yourself when you're dealing with gifts? If you really, really, really want something, then you should just say no. Because your judgment's already clouded. But they thought about it. I think they decided to write to the vendors and say, look, these are tough times. And there are a lot of people in this community who are really in need. And we frankly would just like it if you would not send us or our staff anything during the holidays, and think about all the other organizations and other people who are in need. And other places have done that, and some people get offended. Oh, I'm not trying to bribe you. This is the way business is. I'm just trying to give you that, whatever. But I think just trying to discourage people from doing it, from businesses and other people. And then if it's just, you know, your occasional brownies, whatever, cookies, whatever. The reason why I say it depends is because when I was a manager, I had the same kind of approach that someone would give us tickets to, you know, baseball, football, whatever. I wouldn't take them, but we would raffle them off for staff. And my logic was, well, we have staff members who can't afford to go to the Steelers and other things like that, and so that would be a benefit to them. What I missed in my logic, which someone pointed out years later, was you haven't informed the person who gave you the tickets that this isn't acceptable for me to take them. I haven't told them that I gave them to somebody else. So I'm kind of curing the problem without going back to the original person. I got them. Yeah, they still think I got them. So, yeah, I just think it's, you know, a good practice. So, someone gives you something, you don't know who gave it to you, and it's too extraordinary for you to take, then you give it to someone else in need. So one of the reasons why, we're talking about a couple of cases I think that might help kind of get our arms around. We've got these value sets. I got my personal set of values, and then how do I make them real at work? So a little bucket of blacktop. So we'll try this one. You guys have potholes in your community?
Only on the state roads.
All right, so, you know, we give our staff a lot of discretion, and this is one point that we'll really reinforce with them. You give your staff a lot of discretion. For those of you leading a department, if you stop and thought about how much discretion your staff have and what they might do with it, it might keep you up at night. Because, you know, so you've got a crew is out there with the hot patch, and they're patching the potholes. It's spring. They've got their route. They know what they're doing. You leave them alone, just send them out, say, here's your task for today. So they're patching potholes, and they're driving down this one street, and they're patching the pothole. Door opens to a house, and an elderly woman comes out, let's say a grandmother, comes out of the house, says hello to the guys, and she says, she has this little bucket with her, and she says, okay, I have this hole back up near my porch where the stairs come down, and I just need a little bit of bucket of blacktop because I'm afraid one of these days I'm going to, twist and break my ankle there, and I don't have anybody to help me. Would you help me? Okay. What should the crew do?
See, if they provide mediator service and not do anything, they wouldn't have to worry about it. Yeah. Then there'd be no problem. Take a pass.
Isn't there just like public works on it? What do they do? Fix the hole? Okay. Hold that thought. Sell her a bucket of asphalt. Is $25 for one cash from you? You want to try again? Okay, she's going to pay her boss. The discussion we wanted you to have, nothing's going to get done if every time your employees have to use discretion, they have to call the boss. What are they going to do? What should they do? Who says patch it? You give her the asphalt and not do the work. She's a little old lady. How's that going to help? So most of you think they shouldn't do it. You are heartless. What is the definition of customer service in this community?
I'll give you a great example from Public Works after I just moved here. Working on the council, I wasn't home to anybody hardly. And I was having to do something on my side of the meter, I think it was, but I didn't know that they were responsible for anything on my side of the meter. Anyway, a Public Works person had come by and I mentioned what I needed to do. I thought it was his responsibility to know it's on your side. He sat there and he told me what to do. He actually had a little piece of pipe. He said, well, I think this will work for you. He didn't do anything. So give me a piece of pipe, maybe that's not ethical. I go, no, I don't even being called in to do anything else. And he took that time to tell me what to do. I'm real close when it comes to those kinds of things. And after that, I thought the Public Works Department was one of the greatest places.
Yes. Yes. So
he didn't violate what he was, he didn't work on their side, but
he gave you some advice.
Yeah.
So, who wants to chime in on this?
The quandary is the question of what should we do as a public service agency versus what are our agency regulations or our state regulations? I can't do that question. Well, I'm not sure. I guess the question I would ask is just for any other citizen.
Okay, so.
And if the answer is yes, then I would.
So what do you?
It's not something that we would do.
What do you think your crew's going to do? They're going to give her the blacktop. Why? Because she's a grandmother, she's an elderly woman. Their personal value set is like
And we drilled customer service into our employees.
a certain extent. So that's customer service. So they drive down. They're not asking for anything in return. So wait. So they drive down the road. They give her the bucket of blacktop, help her out. Because I'm telling you what, I don't care what your regulations are, they fix that pothole. Driving down the road, big burly guy comes out of his house. Hey, I saw you gave her blacktop. I want it too. What do you think they're going to do with that big burly guy?
Yeah, we know.
See you later, get your stuff, here's a list of contractors. So one judgment is, do you do it for everybody or not?
Well, I want them to do that because that is helping them, but isn't that a bit of time and labor that we're giving to her that they want to give somebody else? So, I mean, I think you talk to some graders sometimes, you have that discretion to let them operate with those.
You do. It is gray. And so the kind of point of this exercise is for the group and the organization to have a conversation about where are those barriers and when am I doing something that might fall outside of the norms and expectations for customer service. So they go to the grandmother's house, there's a call, something, whatever, and while they're there, she asks them to do something that's, you know, de minimis. She's not asking for anything in return. It's a favor to her. You know, it's your guys can do it. It's not moving a piano. They do it. And she writes a letter to the city manager and says, your employees are wonderful. Are you all in agreement you're not going to reprimand these officers for using some discretion and doing something? Versus they are on their way someplace and one of the officers says, I've got this table I got to get moved at my house. Can we stop by and do it? Then you're like, no. Okay, so building on your point, which I actually agree with, is so that person spent 10 minutes with you and gave you a small de minimis piece of pipe and it solved your problem, didn't actually do the work, he wasn't working on personal property, he offered you just some advice, it worked. Think about all the people in the offices who spend, I mean, you get some customers, you could spend an hour with somebody, hour and a half. So how do you weigh that labor? You know, it's customer service. So you get somebody, it's a tax situation, it's a building inspection situation, they don't really know what they're doing. You don't sit there and say, well, here's the rules, go help yourself. If it's a resident, you try to help them. So you can invest significant time within the office that nobody sees trying to help a client or customer. If that's how you all define customer service, that's great. Make sure that everybody understands where those parameters are. So I get your point. The thing about I'm doing this just for myself and I'm using, you know, I'm going out of my way to have some other employee help me do something that's really strictly personal is not a good comparison. But, you know, if it's de minimis labor and time, and that's how you all have defined customer service, then make sure that everybody's on the same page. Okay, so one of your leadership responsibilities is not to walk by something that you know is unethical. So I don't know what they're doing, but, you know, if it's something like, you know, taking surplus materials home, I mean, I don't know what they're doing, but. Oh. Well, Yeah, I would report it. Report it. Why wouldn't you report it? If someone's doing something that's harming public property, I'd report it. Okay. That's a matter of personal style, because it's a matter of personal style. Whether you're willing, if you see something, like say someone's running their dog in the park off a leash and not cleaning up after it, if you could report that to somebody who's then going to have to go find that person and deal with it, or as a citizen of the community, you could say, I'm sure your dog's really friendly, but you realize people are afraid of dogs, and that's why there's a dog leash. And the other thing is kids play out here if you don't clean. So, there's that personal challenging, or it's reporting it, but,
The person in charge of that, I didn't know.
Well, that's not good.
I'm in the land use realm, so
A little cynical?
a little cynical. We have this example of going to take it and help another person. Sometimes you get in this where no good deed goes unpunished. Where you would have that situation where, well, why this house and not this house? And it tends to blow up more than
We're next week to pay your whole driveway.
You make somebody great calls where you think you are providing customer service. Sometimes they tend to solve a bigger issue than if you would have just said, I'm sorry, trying to walk you through it as far as we can go. You do get a lot of these great.
They are, but, I would say in your defense, you use the same standard that you try to use with all the people, and in 20 cases, you had one person who was really unhappy, who did it the wrong way, and at the end of the day, blamed you for it. And you would hope that the organization would say, it's the same approach you've used with all these people. One case out of 20, somebody isn't happy, but we applaud the fact that you try to provide customer service.
Well, even here, though, it's kind of interesting, who would do it, who wouldn't it? We're split. We're splitting it.
And that's why you need to have a conversation about these are what the values are, and these are the sorts of things that we think are within that realm of value, and here are some cases that would be outside that realm of value, because there will be people who will not differentiate between a little bit of something for this resident and a little bit of something for me because I happen to be a resident as well. So you said come back after hours. You have a moonlighting policy? It depends on, it depends on what it is. So here's a classic example. It happens all the time. Division of the line on the property. Your crew goes out, somebody reports the sewer backup, your crew goes out, they check it out, they figure out, sorry, blockage is on the homeowner's side, we can't help you. You ever been in that situation? It can make you crazy if you got that stuff going on. So homeowners, please, you gotta help me. It's late in the day, I don't have a plumber, whatever. The guys say no, because there are some rules that are hard and fast. You will not cross that line on sewage issues like that. You shouldn't, really. Liability, all kinds of things. So the crew says, I feel really badly for you, but we got a policy, we can't do it, it's going to cost us our jobs, we can't do it. But you know what, I'll come back after hours because I'm a licensed plumber and I'll fix it for you. So is that okay? And but you got to pay me $25 because I've got gas and all that. No, it's not okay because, going through, I should have been a lawyer. Think about the liability. First of all, your employee is getting personal business out of leveraging their position to get some personal business on the side. None of the other plumbers in town had an opportunity to do that. Second of all, I can promise you, if there's anything wrong with the work that you did, they'll be right back to City Hall saying, you caused it, whatever. Third is, Well, now, how do we really know that the crew was objective in deciding where the issue was? Maybe they're gaming the system. Maybe they're very honest people, but doesn't it open the door for them to say perhaps, so you're undecided about where some of these lines are. You need to get decided as a group because you need to be able to articulate to your staff and allow them to use judgment. And when they use some poor judgment, counseling, or maybe you could have done that a different way, but they're going to do some things using that value set, and someone's going to be very happy they did it, and they're going to write and say, thank you very much. And are you going to support that person, or are you going to say, oh, you should have done that? There is it is all gray. That's not all gray, but a lot of it is very gray, and so having the conversation. So there are some places, we do that story all the time, there's some places, absolutely not. Law says you can't work on private property. Some people think if you work on private property, in essence, becomes kind of some places it's like a taking and the property now reverse. Some places no, because that little bucket of blacktop's going to turn into a driveway, And so absolutely not, we would never do it. And other places say, okay, so customer service would be, no ma'am, I can't help you, but here's a list of contractors you can call. That's not a very good solution, but other places say, we can define this. Someone who is healthy and available and able to go do it for themselves, we can make the judgment that we're not going to help you. But the elderly in our community are people that, serving people equitably, that's a group that we would pay attention to.
It really does not affect the scheduled events that business is supposed to do for the day. I guess I don't see the issue. Very good, the person is going to have to spend quite a bit of time. They're probably taking that person away from activities that they were actually scheduled to do. So it's a bit of a judgment call, but it really depends on the amount of time. I'm sure planning one is just as well. It's all there. But I'm sure there are cases where they kind of help them through it because, so it's.
And you expect that.
Yeah.
We don't want to live, I hope that standard of customer service is not just read the book and figure it out for yourself.
Right.
Because that's, I don't think that's really the definition of, but where are those lines and what kind of values are you encouraging people to use? So, okay, here's another one for you. Does it snow here? Okay, so there's a big ice or snowstorm heading down the pike, heading towards you, and for some unknown reason, there is no salt. Salt's an environmentally bad thing in some places, or sand, whatever you use to cure the de-icer. Okay, none of that is available in the yard. The vendor can't deliver on time, so you're stuck. The storm is barreling down the coast towards you. You send Bob, your can-do public works employee, call Bob in your office. Bob, I need you to go do something. I need you to drive down the road 120 miles to the next vendor who has material for us, load up your vehicle, and get back here in time before the snowstorm happens. Bob's a can-do employee, jumps in the truck, heads on down the road, gets there. There is a huge line in front of him at this depot. 40-some trucks. He does a mental calculation and figures if he waits in line, there's no way he's going to get back to address the storm in time. So as he's sitting there trying to figure out what to do, he notices that people are jumping the line, going behind the depot, coming out with trucks fully loaded. So Bob goes up and tries to figure out what's going on and finds out for an extra $50 cash payment to the foreman, he too can get his vehicle loaded. No-brainer to Bob. Pays the $50 cash, gets the truck loaded, comes on back in time for the storm. So community is safe. No problem. Bob goes in and asks the public works director for his $50 back. All right. So do you give him the $50? What do you do in that situation? Is it okay? Bob, it's really nice of you to do that.
guess my employee came to me. The way that it's a judgment of and that liability is their supervisor. Follow it back where that occurred. Back to, you have some follow-up of, okay, you realize your performance is doing this. We were in an emergency situation. How you perform now.
Okay, well, we're doing the right thing going back to them.
I can't prove the $50. I can't account for it. I need a bond. Director, if I reimburse my, but if the employee already done that, made that decision, you might not get the best decision to make. Yeah, you hope they call you and did.
All right, wrapping it up. He's the go-to guy with the phone. He calls you and says, David, he calls you and says, what do I do? Vendor, you call the vendor, it's just ringing. Bob's in line. Bob wants to know, do I pay this guy $50 and get the heck out of here, or do I sit in line? What do you tell Bob to do?
At that point, if I've got no other options for material, and I need to get that material, I give Bob permission to actually get
Sounds like a no-return situation. When I was a very young and naive finance director, we had the policy you didn't get reimbursed unless you had receipts. And a very senior, seasoned member of the police department who came in and said, I've got all these, things I need to be paid for. And I said, well, you don't have any receipts. He said, well, okay. Left the office. Half an hour later, he came back with all these receipts. So,
so the thing is, really the thing you're describing, you can look at as a life and death situation. You really could. And, I mean, those kind of things, situations.
Ah.
No, but the point is, I assume all these people, while we're not all working for the Public Works Department.
It's a life and death situation. You would tell Bob to pay the $50. You're worried about the next community down the road that didn't get their ice, the icer.
I'm the employee, I'm going to call my supervisor. That's the first thing I'm going to do is say, I can expedite this. Remember, we've had expediting, when you're in the business world, many times we've had to step up and expedite, pay extra to do it. And if my boss says it's good for, I'm good for it, it's not.
What's the difference between this transaction and paying a little bit of extra in the business world to get FedEx or to get through the line at Disney or? Who said the beat? It's a bribe. It's a bribe. It's a bribe. How do we think about bribes? How's it going to look on the Oregonian?
I was going to look on the Oregonian for talking sandbags, letting sandbags without paying $50, maybe wrongly, but in an emergency effort where we need sandbags, if we don't get them, that's going to make a bigger story. The city, they couldn't get sandbags. So those are the kind of things.
They're victims, not perpetrators.
I know what I'm going to do if I'm making a call. It really is.
Don't think you're going to call a mayor.
I mean, that's part of what they say. Go ahead and get the material, bring it back, and then I'm going to write a letter, probably through the city attorney's office, and the copy's going to go to AG, and we're going to say this happened to us. We think it's unethical. We think it's potentially illegal. And this matter should be investigated. But we got the material. And that's what I'm going to do.
You gonna pay Bob the $50?
Probably thank him for a donation. I hadn't thought of that.
So, and what message does it send people, all the people who stood in line and watched that truck that's got the City of Oregon City emblem on the side of it, that you all jumped the line and paid the bribe? And
well, the way you described it, there were lots of people in that line, and they were just taking advantage of everyone.
Besides that, the mirror.
It's called, no, it's actually called, usually a breaking of the law, because almost always yes, profiteering. So we're going to use this case in the next couple days, and we do role play. So somebody gets to be the mayor, and somebody gets to be the manager, and the public works director, and Bob. And
It's very fact specific, though, the way you're describing it. Hypothetical. These things turn on.
yeah, and so the reason judgment plays a big part.
Asking a lot of questions. What are you seeing? Who's available to talk to?
Right. Yes.
So if somebody, if you know somebody that engaged in that behavior, the guy, the woman, some of the you know who's engaged in that behavior, is it, don't we need to participate in that unethical behavior?
Yes, it is. It takes two people for a bribe to happen: the person who asked for it and the person who paid for it. And the reason why you don't have to pay to get a bribe to get a driver's license anywhere in America other than probably Washington, D.C., if you've got issues, is because we as a culture said we're not going to support this sort of stuff. We just said no. You know, everybody's entitled to public service. You don't have to pay extra. The difference between something, so some organizations have a regulation that says if you want your building permit expedited, you have to pay an extra fee for it. It's the law, the rule, it's publicly ordained, the money's going to a public organization. This person is getting, this is a personal transaction where somebody is benefiting. He's put it, no, he's taking advantage personally of the situation. Now, you all are right to call him on the issue. It's just, when do you kind of draw the line in the sand and say we're not going to participate in these events and efforts?
It's good at our police chief says the circumstance guarantee that person survives is to actually pay the ransom. You can't do anything about it. Paying ransom. Ransom request is illegal. The police chief realizes that he's not in a position to do anything at this point, and ransom might be the best way to save an individual's life.
Well, you're not using public funds to do this.
Well, you're advising somebody to do something illegal. I mean, you know it's illegal, you say, you have to do it.
I know ransom illegal.
I don't know if I would suggest that pay the ransom.
I mean, a lot of places that.
Pay the ransom.
Yeah.
But with that, you got like the same person charging $50 on the other side. It's really the same kind of thing.
That reminds me of the HR director with health records and employees' friends. Reminds me of that. I have enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
That's one that
I think they're different situations. If my child has been kidnapped and they demand a ransom, I think the authorities are going to tell you don't pay the ransom because, you know, statistically it doesn't pay off, whatever. But I elect that I'm going to do it, and then people watch to see, you know, who's going to take the money or whatever. I think the moral issue really, or the ethical issue really, is when governments decide they're not going to pay, you know, they're not going to engage in those sorts of things to protect people who've sort of gone outside their sphere where they shouldn't have gone. They're not going to intercede on their behalf. I mean, you know, morally you want them to do something, but you have to realize that you can't, their job is not to serve everybody, one individual at a time when they've done something personally that they're going to face repercussions on. I'll talk about your case in just a second, but, or that case, but, so here's what I've said to your staff is, you're going down a slippery slope when you encourage people to break the law to achieve the results that you really want. And the problem is that we live in a culture where we're used to it. You know, you pay a little bit of extra money to go to Disney World, you pay for FedEx, and so it's kind of the culture. You know, used to be years ago, if you went to the baseball game and you had crappy seats, you could give the usher $5 and go sit in a better seat. I mean, that's kind of the culture we live in. So your can-do employee, because you haven't talked to the person about what the parameters are, he's not personally benefiting from this situation. He's trying to do the right thing. You could argue he would be personally benefited and he could just sat in line for a couple extra hours and got more overtime. He's trying to do the right thing. He's going about it entirely the wrong way. And so I think you want to focus on your business practices. So think about, like, this another thing that Warren Buffett said. Yeah, I just think it's a slippery slope.
But the weather department was wrong, and it's perfect. It's very sunny all day.
Yeah.
I think that you turned me on something. I thought it was very important that you think too. Was somebody else, kind of the offering of it, when somebody complete the transaction, you became complicit.
Which is the least evil? Really, it boils down to, because we have a life and death situation.
Okay, so you only care about life and death situations in your community. Right, okay, so your Bob gets the salt because he paid the bribe, and he gets back, and he jumped the line in front of Gladstone. And they didn't get the salt, and some, yes.
And somebody probably died in Gladstone because they didn't jump in. I mean, I don't know. The responsibility of that person is to the city, which they're employed by. I mean,
They have a responsibility to do things the right way, not to engage in illegal and unethical conduct and how they get it done.
This guy's pocketing the money right there on the side as you.
Yes.
Understood at the end. He's committing a crime right there. Yeah. So I'm like, if they call you, you call us, we're gonna say, oh, sheriff's department, I'm taking this car, it is in the city.
and then I drive around and I put it back in the line.
Maybe, but that guy, the police need to come out there and deal with that situation right there.
Here's one resolution of the problem that some people think is, you know, you sent your can-do employee out there. Who is talking to the supervisor about the fact that you sent your best employee out there without any kind of conversation about what are the parameters? So supervisor's on the hook here, and maybe the reason you didn't have salt or sandbags or whatever else is the supervisor's fault for not being properly prepared. But I think that this is one case that I don't think is a real story, but it's a great case that actually a friend of mine in Kansas wrote, because you have an expectation that people are going to approach these situations one way, and they're going to use their personal value set. And if you've not had these conversations about where those lines are in the sand, they'll use their personal value set, and at the end of the day, you may not be happy about it. And that's, you know, if you do the ends justify the means, and are you concerned about what are the ethical business practices you have? So Warren Buffett said, you know, we don't want to engage in anything that we'd be embarrassed to see on the front page of the Wall Street paper or the Wall Street, you know, Journal, or that we as citizens would find, you know, disgusting or distasteful.
Well, the thing is, in this particular case, I think you would say you made a decision. Nancy doesn't know you had to make the decision. And then you come up with a statement immediately, what happened, what transpired. Send it to the Attorney General, whoever could ultimately make that evaluation. Explain what those circumstances are. If you're taking, you're taking responsibility for the action that you've done, you're not going to sweep it under the carpet.
Yeah.
You felt that the situation was such that you had to take extraordinary and perhaps a legal measures to do it. And basically, it becomes probably a judgment of society at one level or another.
Bob's going to be held accountable to you all, his supervisor and up the chain of command. It's a good conversation to have, but be clear. Here's what I'm advising your staff tomorrow. It is a slippery slope. Don't do it. You're participating in an illegal act. You're besmirching the good name of your organization, because everybody who sees you do this will just reach the conclusion that that's how you all do business. The supervisor should have addressed Bob. Some people say Bob should be made whole because you put him out there in that situation. He's not trying to benefit himself, but what he's doing is he's trying to do the right thing, but he's going about it in entirely the wrong way. I know, I'm tough. So that other situation that I'm not sure if this one's on the, but we'll talk about this one. This one's a true story. So it's a relatively small community organization, and the HR director, or one of the HR staff members who's responsible for dealing with benefits, is working with the fire chief's son. The fire chief's son is a dependent on his medical benefits, and she's working with him to resolve some, issues with the healthcare companies. You know how they are. So during the course of working with him, he discloses to her that he is HIV positive. And in the course of, they resolve the problem, and he's so appreciative that he stops by her office and gives her, a small gift, some flowers or something. And as he's leaving the office, some of the other staff members are kind of gossiping, and they said, well, oh, Andy, yeah, did you know that he's dating the city manager's daughter? So it's a small community, and your kids gone to school with all these kids. So you're thinking, oh my gosh, you don't say anything, but you're thinking this is a train wreck. Manager's daughter, fire chief's son, he's got HIV. What do I do? I feel like I should do something here. Like I have a moral and ethical obligation to intervene.
Disclosed though, she found out, or did he disclose it, or did she find it out from the medical records?
He disclosed it to her. None of her business. It's a train wreck.
No, I disagree with that because there's the possibility, hypothetically, that he hasn't told her. And I think the person to whom he made the disclosure, that should be part of the conversation, only one-on-one. Say, did you disclose that to ever to your dating?
It's not your responsibility to
You're going to feel a year or two down the road when you have a conversation with him. He says, you say, I hope you've gotten counseling, and if you disclose this to anyone that you're involved with, then he basically says, it's none of your business.
I don't think you can go farther than that, but I think you have to take the initial step.
Does that stuff fall into the same
with public health personally. I know these people. I know the manager. I mean, how am I going to feel in a year or two? What if the worst possible thing happens and the manager's daughter gets HIV?
Somebody may say HIV is so much more worse than some other medical. I'm not saying you've got a person that's saying, oh my God, this person has HIV. Well, how can you make that discernment? Or this person has hepatitis C. It's going to come down to what is that HR director personality. And what about the trust? Hey, you have the HR, and you've got these medical protections. By the time those forms are in town, and all of a sudden, you know, you were working closely with your. Trying to think of it, I think that this is.
So they're acting out of, so one of the issues is emotion, but you grow up in these organizations, you know people, you develop personal relationships with people, but ultimately it's a violation of the law. You cannot disclose personal confidential information. So your duty is to protect your organization, not to protect the participants. Well, and then, beyond everything, you don't even know the facts. So you may feel like you need to intercede out of some real and true concern, and empathy and concern are not bad things. So you may feel compelled to intercede. Emotion and bias is clouding your judgment, because your primary obligation as a public employee in this situation is to follow the law and not to create harm that's going to impact the organization. So the worst possible thing happens, and 2 years later the city manager comes to you and says, well, you must have known, or what did you know? I say, well, my obligation was to do my job. Once HR people are gossiping about personal information that shuts down your ability to do your job, the last time people will come to you or trust you, whatever, to open up the organization for liability. And why would I, it's gossip that they are dating. I don't know what their personal relationship is. It's not my responsibility to, personally feel that way. But you don't even know. Okay, well, so this is a true situation that caused the staff members some real anxiety about what to do. Someone said, well, maybe I should just go talk to the manager. No. That's breaching the trust, it's breaking the law, and just kind of stepping back and saying, what's my primary responsibility here? It's to follow the law, to protect the organization, it's to be able to do my job, and that this is not my problem to solve. This is this individual's problem, these people who are in this situation. That's not a bad strategy, and then when you're talking to somebody, yeah. Well, be careful there, but the opportunity really is, are you aware of the resources and the counseling, COPE and other kinds of programs that are available to you? And, I would highly encourage you, if you've not explored those, to go explore those. She would quit her job. Stop and think about your responsibility to the organization and your personal interests here. Don't just decide, well, I can fix this problem and head down that road without considering what the impact is on the organization. It's a very hard one. So then you compound it, we've done this case with people who've gone through personal medical issues, and this is such a sensitive topic to them. They're like, oh my gosh, you absolutely have a moral obligation to intercede. It's still against the law as well. If you were to quit and reveal it, get sued, you might not be covered. But anyway, so just like real world situations that some of these are a little bit more complex than maybe the average ones that you deal with, but we have a whole series for people just to try to get everyone thinking about, your values and the difference between your values and what the organization expects of you, and like are we just doing what the culture requires of us, or are we setting kind of a higher standard there? So we do want you to be able to go home this evening. So when you think about attributes, creating ethical culture. So we had a conversation at the break about culture. So the reason why Cook County and the city of Chicago, where are they on the ethics scale? Yeah. They're not. So it's a cultural issue. It's a cultural issue. So New Orleans, Philadelphia, you can name them. It's about creating a culture. And changing culture is very difficult, but you're thinking about what do you need to do to have an ethical culture? Well, you have to have this commitment to the right kind of values, doing it the right way, so that you don't have bobs running around. The respect for the real roles and the contributions that you make as staff, elected officials. That almost, every interaction you have with people is an opportunity to build and maintain trust. And especially, again, your frontline employees. When people see things, when people are rude to them, when they use improper language, that's so damaging to that trust. So the interactions you have with your residents, interactions you have with each other are opportunities to build trust. And again, if leadership is not paying attention to this issue, nobody else in the organization is going to stand up. You really got to be leading on this one. Because as you can see, it's a difficult kind of topic and conversation to have. So you think about the things that you can do within the organization to kind of create a stronger culture, leading by example, being clear about values and acceptable conduct, having some good internal policies, and also conducting training. So just a little joke here. It was the moment of truth after which they all got back to lying. It's about sincerity in this and not just, so, if you think about this, if you've been around the block a little bit, you know this. You're always being watched. You never know who's looking at you, who's taking their example from you, their cue. You may do something, a good thing, and somebody may observe it, and you may never know what impact you had on that individual. Okay, so you have children, right? It's the same thing with children, You can't tell them what to do, you got to demonstrate it. And you never know when they're watching you. This is being watched, it's important. You set the tone for the organization. I think it's a good step to do some training for staff, and there'll be lots of opportunities afterwards to talk about these issues. When you see something that's wrong, you step up to the plate and do something to champion ethical conduct. You talk about your values, and you understand what the consequences are in the organization. So think about values. Okay, please do not decide you want a code of ethics and you assign this to the city attorney or to just the HR director to write the code of ethics. It's not worth the paper it's written on. If you want to have a code of ethics, you want to talk about values, it's something you really have to do ground up, top down, sideways, crossways, engage enough staff members in the process to talk about what are the values of the organization, what do they look like, what's acceptable conduct. If nothing, by using a cross group, the teams and departments understand what everyone thinks they're unique and nobody else has these issues, but doing some cross conversation about it gets people to understand that you might have a different set of circumstances, but there are all these values that are involved in it. So you might want to do something about a code of ethics. But then you really have to get down into the behaviors that support that code. And you don't want to write the laundry list of don't do this, do that. You want to try to get people to understand how they can use their discretion within the job that they have. And then how do those values guide decisions? And so one thing, you know, when you talk about the work that you do and you talk with your staff members, talking about the values that guide your decisions can be really helpful to them. So how do those values guide decisions? So why do you think this stuff happens, unethical conduct? Why? No, the number one reason? Management's fault. It gets a chuckle from staff, but they usually think this is true. And to some degree it is. There are things that are happening in the world, new and different every day, and you need to address them. So here's one quick example. What would you do in this case? So I don't know what your budget situation is, but it's not uncommon that local governments are having to cut, and now they're getting down to some really critical services, and it's tough. So the critical service that the staff has recommended to the commission that not be funded next year is the library. There's actually a case on this one, which I'm doing right now. So you hear the news because David actually comes to you and says, I'm sorry, a decision's been made by the city commission, this is what's going to happen, the library will be closed, and you're going to be out of work. You go home and you're like, what are they thinking? Libraries in this economy are not just about getting books. It's how people who are unemployed have free access to the internet. Nobody has money to take their kids anywhere, so it's a source of free entertainment and almost babysitting. I know you don't like the last part. So you're at home and you're venting with your children, and they're like, Mom, don't get mad. This is what you should do. You need to tell everybody. So start a Facebook page. Start, you know, funding everybody in the community. Let people know this isn't right. You always telling us to stand up and say something, do something. So that's exactly what you do. You create a Save the Library Facebook page. Next thing you know, just 1 second. Next thing you know, it turns out that you're posting something on your wall, and it says, what were they thinking? This is not well thought out. It's not going to actually save that much money. It's a bad decision. And all your page says is save the library. Well, guess what? You're friends with the mayor, so your wall posting ends up on his wall posting, however that works. And it goes out to a whole group of people. You get the list of the friends of the library, and you get them, send them a message too. The next thing you know, you're on Twitter sending your 140 characters about how this is a really bad idea. The mayor's in David's office asking, what the heck is going on here? I'm pretty sure that's a library employee who's doing this. And we made this tough decision, and now I got all my neighbors asking me, is it true you're closing the library, but it's not going to save any money? What's going on? Mayor tells David, you order that staff member to take that page down. In the facts and stories I'm presenting them, you're still employed. Okay. Can you tell us, should your employees be on Facebook talking about city business? Is it okay to order your employee to take a page down talking about city business? Yes? How many yeses? I'm sorry. What did I say? Is it okay for the city manager to order an employee to take down a page that talks about city business? Do you have a social media policy? Okay, is your employee allowed to do this under the social media policy?
However, Maureen's a very smart person. We got the library advisory. Let me tell you what the situation is. The library advisory committee is going to tell this to the president of the library, and they're going to do it without her doing a thing on Facebook.
Okay. So, I'm also not sure it's really okay for you to be behind the scenes saying those things. So,
She's telling the board what happened. You're declaring that the library budget is been cut. We're going to have to look at the library. You're getting in the facts of the situation.
is that her job to give them the facts of the situation? If she's just giving the facts, that's one thing. If she's an employee, if she is logging or presenting information that is not the organization's position or not factually accurate, she's got an issue.
It doesn't talk about any city politics. But it seems like speakers running a vote on the solicitors. They can do that.
She's coached anyway.
On their job. They can do that. That's legal. But it's not okay to say school board strangers.
First of all, the budget document is not a single document.
No, it's not. But so just to clarify what the kind of heart of the issue is, it's a good thing you have a social media policy because a lot of places don't, because this is new, uncharted territory, things that have come out, and management, in some cases, has not defined where those lines are, and an employee would go out and do something. Now, the issue here is, you know, there is a right way and a wrong way to employees have not lost their right to express their opinion about their employer and their community and things like that. So you can, but the employee needs to be aware of what and how you say it and what you do on Facebook might have an impact on your position. So the fact that she is saying, this is not going to save us any money after the organization's already vetted this, and creating the appearance perhaps that because she is an employee, that she might have inside information, and then having her out of sync with what the administration and the commission are doing is not helpful. So you have a social media policy, that's a good thing. She's the library director, and she does that and say it wasn't her job on the chopping block. I'm sure she would be either counseled or shown exit. Because the higher you are, the greater the expectation is that when you're out in public and what you say reflects on the organization, and there's an expectation that, you know, you support the organization, its decisions. Not to mention, you know, if you're in police and public safety and you're on Facebook, what you do and say on Facebook can have an impact on your ability to do your job too. So anyway, employees think it's all management's fault. We say to employees, sometimes it is because they haven't provided you the right guidance, but nothing will relieve you of the obligation to ask, inquire, use good judgment before you do something that's really foolish. Uncharted territory and experience, that can happen to anybody. You're coming to this from a different world. We've got Facebook situations going on we've never had before. Sometimes unethical things happen because of peer pressure, tight teams and subcultures. It's a really great thing. Picking on public works tonight. It's a really great thing when you can form a good team, they work well together. But after time, you may have created a team where no one's really willing to stand up and say, look, this is wrong what you're doing, challenge you or report it. And there's some, you know, pretty significant stories out there that have left the leadership wondering, well, why didn't somebody say something? Clearly, people knew what was going on, yet nobody had the courage to talk about it. So the team it's a great thing, but you need to encourage employees to be able to report things when things are not going well. How many times have you seen somebody do one little thing wrong and then totally screw it up by doing multiple things? If you've done something wrong, your best bet is to come clean. Personal loyalties. Sort of like the HIV case, sometimes people are driven to do things, favors for family and friends because they're really nice people and they just don't want to say no. So sometimes personal loyalties can get us into trouble. If the personal cost to do the right thing is too high, I may not do it. So if I think I'm going to lose my job by reporting that when I've seen something unethical or potentially illegal happen, then, and I can't afford to lose my job, and human nature being what it is, I might place my personal financial security above my obligation to report to the organization. And we'll talk a little bit about what you can do in those situations. Emotions, name them. Anger, lust, rage, anything. Sometimes people just do the wrong thing. Arrogance, the rules don't apply to me. If you have people on your staff who are like that, you need to really pay attention to them, have some counseling, and potentially an exit strategy. And sometimes we just can't see the forest for the trees. We might be doing this a long time. We just lose perspective and we do something that's really foolish. Story of a public works foreman who'd been with the city for 15 years. They were demolishing an old pool that was loaded with copper wire, and it was, unexpected, and they had a contract or a way to get rid of all the concrete and stuff. And crew guys said, this stuff's really valuable. Do you mind if we take it? And for some reason, he said, yeah. And they took it, several $1,000s worth, and he lost his job on that one. It's kind of like, wasn't really thinking about the fact that that's not theirs to take. So, the good internal policies, outside employment, conflicts of interest, when and how political activity is okay, merit-based hiring, credit cards, use of city vehicles and equipment, computers, and social media. I mean, those are just sort of the standard ones that, if you help regulate them, you can keep people out of trouble. Really important, you may not be in a hiring mode, but really important is when you're in your hiring process to hire people who know the difference between right and wrong, and to be able to link not just did you meet your goals and metrics this year, but did you do it the right way? Are you an ethical person in how you get your work done? Ethics orientations for new employees, and if you're hiring a senior level person, it's a pretty good idea to ask them a question about what are your values. Have you ever been in a situation where you were asked to do something that wasn't right? How did you handle it? If you're hiring a senior level person and they can't answer those questions, then it might send you a clue that they're not really attuned to that. And if they were to face a problem, they may not be able to deal with it. So, sorry, I'm a Warren Buffett fan again. This is a good quote about, it's about the right who. So when you're hiring people, think about intelligence, integrity, and energy. If they don't have the first one, which is integrity, then the other two are going to kill you. So you've seen some really ambitious people who don't get it. And then this whole compliment about training. I think this is the beginning of a conversation in the organization that you want to really encourage. Where do your employees go if they have ethical issues? Are you clear about that? Do they have to stay within the chain of command? Do you allow them to go outside the chain of command? I mean, you really need to think about that. Requiring everybody to report a problem or talk to their supervisor about it is not a really good idea. What you really want to do is encourage people to raise questions. And it's not necessarily I saw something that was really bad. I just have a question about something. Or maybe I saw something and I'm not really sure if it was right or not right, or I may not have all the facts, but it's bothering me. So encourage people to have opportunities to talk about ethical issues. And, the approach we use is, use these case studies. You can use, things from the newspaper just to kind of start the conversation. You pretty much don't want to say, we're going to start with ethical training based on something that you did wrong. I mean, you really kind of have to start in a way that doesn't kind of challenge people's or send the message that you're doing this because people don't know what they're doing. They're unethical. So you need to create kind of the right environment for it. Be consistent in your enforcement actions. You're treating people fairly and equitably. Sometimes when it's a lower level employee who does something, you deal with the employee, but you don't deal with the supervisor. I mean, so you need to be consistent in how you deal with it. And then where do people go? Is there a safe way for people to report issues? And then don't shoot the messenger. You know how that is. The first person who's got the courage to walk into your office and raise a question with you or ask you a question, if you yell at them or throw them out of your office, that's the last employee who could ever have the courage to come in and talk to you about something. And believe me, you want to hear about this before everybody else does. It's an example of the importance of not shooting the messenger. So this is a real story from Asheville, North Carolina, and the headline. And we do that, like rip from the headlines, to kind of help people understand ethical issues. So this one was the city HR director and I underscored that and bolded it. And 3 other department employees face felony charges in a fraud investigation. The director faces 1 felony obstruction of justice charge for allegedly providing false information to police investigators who were investigating possible fraud in the department. The others are charged with obtaining property by false pretenses. So imagine you're in this situation. Jim has been here a long time. A new employee is hired. New employee is only here a couple months and notices something that's really irregular. And in this case, these employees were falsifying records related to health and benefit accounts, you know, where you can store some money away and you can use it for medical and other expenses. So a new employee sees this and knows it's wrong and goes right up the chain of the command to the city manager's office. Jim has been here a long time. You know he is a great employee. The city manager in this case did the right thing. Opened an investigation. It actually didn't turn out to be the HR director who was stealing the money, but she tried to cover for the other employees. And the whole organization, these are all senior level people who've been there a long time. So sometimes in that situation, you might be inclined to say, no, I know these people, I trust these people, they've been a long time, and here's this new person walking in the door. What do they know? Well, if it's a credible issue, investigate. You know, it's Reagan saying, trust but verify. And that's your obligation. It's not to ignore things that get reported to you. So, pretty powerful. In the interest of kind of getting out on time, this group I don't think should look at the cultural assessments. I'm glad to talk with you all about it. We'll talk with staff and get their feedback on what they thought about it. And then maybe we all can talk about it at a different point in time. It's really your call. Yeah, what do you think? One of the things is, so this is a cultural assessment. It's not like, you know, are you ethical or unethical? It's designed to gauge what individuals think about their own personal expectations in the organization and what do they think about management. And what we do it because it's kind of a way to start the conversation, kind of a touch base. Where are you? And then when you do some things and you came back and did it later, would you be able to move the needle? And you know, we had 103 or 4 people respond to the questions, and the things that we'll be asking them are what surprised you about the results? What can you personally do you think, to improve the results to the extent they need to be improved? And then what do you think the leadership should do in the organization? And, you know, so David, this is really your call about how you want to approach this. You want to spend a few minutes talking about it?
I'm going to be addressing these things anyway. Currently, but if everybody wants to go a little longer, then looks like a great time.
Okay, so because one suggestion would be is the leadership team getting the feedback from the staff. I think the leadership team will have an opportunity to kind of look at these and try to figure out what do they mean or not, and I'm glad to participate in that at some point in time. And then you all, because it's really more of a management issue rather than something. And some of the key things here are, you know, looking at it. Do you have a lot of people saying they don't know where to go to for ethics advice? So that's like a key question. You want to make sure that everybody is clear about where to go to turn for advice. And that one actually could use some work and some effort.
You seem to have some things that sometimes range under the high teens, low 20s. I imagine those are taken a look at.
Actually, I guess when I think about the fact that my knowledge that people have been here a long time, there's never been any other know that they matter, but we don't talk about it. By the fact that we're even having this discussion shows a different kind of commitment. There's a lot of things we can do over the next couple of years to demonstrate that. So if you take that in that context, this isn't such a bad report card, considering that we've never really done that training. So it could be quite a wordsmith, but it's not where I'd like it to be. So
Actually, it's like taking the temperature. Don't use it's not a report card. You didn't get an F, you know, because it's about attitudes and so, but it is nice to take the temperature. And then you can look at this and think, well, what are the practical things that we can do that might, you know, change people's attitudes or just encourage or strengthen them. So we won't talk about this. You know, it's all about making your organization a shining example of good conduct so it doesn't look like these people. You know, and again, another little pearls before swine. Just remember, everybody needs to pay attention about where your true north is. So here is the rat saying, what do you do when you have a moral dilemma? The pig says, I try to listen to that little moral compass we all have in our head. The rat one says, lie, cheat, steal. My moral compass may have lost its moral compass. So, you know, we're good people, but every once in a while we make mistakes. So it's just important to pay attention to this. So just, you know, to reinforce, and this is part of what we'll talk with staff about tomorrow, but I think it's really important. And this is everybody's responsibility. It's not just your responsibility. You're responsible for your own conduct, the organization, but everybody has a dog in this fight. How do we get to our results is really important, and I think as a leadership, you really want to encourage people to do things the right way. You know, you need to have some good policies out there. You need to create safe, you know, non-threatening ways to talk about ethical dilemmas. You can, if you're in a leadership role, you can talk about challenges you've had. You can find lots of other ways to start the conversation. We're going to start it tomorrow. Everybody needs to have the courage to raise issues of concern because everybody's reputation is at stake when people see things happening and they're not willing to step up and report it. And in the interest of time, I won't share with you all those stories of things, really amazing things that have happened in organizations that have harmed everyone. But advice and training is important. Every once in a while, test how we're doing, and this is kind of a test of that. The test of an organization is not whether, you know, you got lots of ethical issues going on or not. The test of the organization is really, do people know what's expected of them? Do they do the right thing on a regular basis? Because some stuff does not come to light. You know, it's not going to hit the newspapers, but that doesn't mean it's okay. So don't punish the messenger. Just think about right values, right way to achieve the right outcome. And, you know, is your own personal moral compass pointing to north? Okay, if you're old enough to remember this guy, your leadership responsibility, if you know that something's going wrong, you have an obligation to report it. And just because, yeah, that whole summer, when did you hear them asking it? Every single person, what did you know, when did you know it, and what did you do about it? So if there's something going on, you cannot run nor hide, especially if you're in a leadership position. It's going to come back to you. So it's the right thing to do, but it's also a great precautionary measure to take. So just some things to close up with. We talk about the newspaper test and things living with you forever. They will now, but it's called Google. You do something, this step, whatever, and that is going to live with you for a long time. And if you think again about your reputation being that intangible, you don't want to do anything that's going to harm your reputation and live with you forever. Sometimes we do things just to be expedient, get the problem off our desk and move on. Sometimes it's really good to take a step back and say, if I do this, am I going to look back on this 10 years from now and think that I did the right thing, or am I going to be so embarrassed that I did this because I was just trying to get a problem resolved? Okay, most of us have a really good interior kind of mechanism, a conscience, you know, so if something's keeping you up at night or bothering you or gnawing at you, you got a problem, so deal with it. Don't ignore it. And, you know, going back to, I don't know why I'm on this whole Watergate deal, but Daniel Shore was a famous journalist who was involved in reporting on Watergate, and his claim to fame was he was actually on the national news reading Nixon's enemy list that he had of enemies of the White House when Shore got to like number 26 and realized it was his name, and so we actually read it on. So he's had a lot of opportunity to go up against the powers that be. And this is what he told his journalism students before he passed away, about the importance of having principles at least once in your lifetime, taking a risk on a principle, even if it brings you up against your bosses. So it's inspiring. I hope you never have to challenge your bosses here, but if you have to, you have to. So, and I like Mark Twain, always do the right thing. Sometimes it's going to gratify some people and mostly astonish the rest. So I thank you for your time, attention, effort. I thought it was a great conversation. It's gray. It's not black and white always, and we need to start filling in the gray amongst you all, with your staff members, with the community even, so that people, can do the good work that they want to do. Their personal reputations will be intact. You build a better community, something that you'll all be proud of, and that people will be proud to work in this organization, and they can build trust and confidence with the public that they serve. So, you have my email and phone number on the front page of the program, so if you have any great ethical stories to share, please send. If you want to change the names, I'll maintain confidentiality. Thanks.